thanks a lot, Nippon, for giving us the opportunity. I don't know how I'll be able to justify after three eminent speakers, especially after her set. So he said overconfidence, right? So when I'm talking about research, he actually kind of downplayed whatever we did, right? He said we can't predict. If you're doing the right research, we are kind of stepping on overconfidence. So with that disclaimer in place, let me start. I would also like to clarify that, I might be stepping on a few regulatory line over the regulatory line whenever a few of my slides, because I'm also part of Das Capital, which is an MFD. But since we practice research, so we have two entities. So my official entity is what was spoken about, Tavasya Capital. I also have my team, which is entirely behind this, Jins and Darshan, if you can just stand up. So a lot of the work, what we do is also a courtesy team. So let me start. I think when we started our business, I think Mrinmay is a co-founder, the Das Capital, Mrinmay Das. He founded up, I joined him later. The focus was always, I was a part of Das Capital only because of my research capabilities. I didn't even know what mutual funds was when I started 2008. But then we kind of, since I was an equity analyst, I tried to incorporate my learnings into mutual funds. Okay. So this is basically how we set up the research rather than methodology. This is probably the mutual fund research architecture. I came from Batliwala Karani. They had a firm called, sister firm called Mata Securities. And they were one of the pioneers in mutual fund research maybe about 20 years ago. So so what we did essentially is, how do all of us recommend funds, right? You have an RM, like here we have Nippon. Suddenly after this event, I go back to office on Monday or tomorrow. First thing which comes to your mind is Nippon. So probably you will start recommending Nippon to one of your clients. Immediately there's a client who needs money, you would probably, right? That's the probability of doing that is extremely high. So what we decided when we set up also was, in the initial part, I was not meeting RNs at all. So basically you should have a Chinese wall, as it were. The sales function for an MFD has to be separate and the research function has to be separate. So the team which picks mutual funds in Das Capital or Tavasya Capital, we work as a combined entity, doesn't meet RMs. I don't allow them to meet RMs. And so I was not doing it when I was not client facing and mutual fund facing about 5-6 years ago. And the same thing works with my other team as well. And also, so that's why we have two separate arms and two separate corporate entities. I'm sure that most of us might not be need not have two corporate entities separate, but at least make sure that the functions are separate. So that's where you also will have an opportunity to build a team, right? So basically what we're saying is you should have an adequate balance between research and sales. So obviously research should be the input for any sales. And also this eliminates that bias, right? So we like an RM, we like a particular AMC, we generally tend to allocate more money to them. If you have an objective kind of a person or a department which kind of analyzes funds, then the chances of eliminating those biases are much higher. That's what we try to do. So basically, we ensure that the fund selection is purely based on merit rather than all other factors, right? So this is what we do in terms of, this is something which we wanted to highlight, that a lot of us fall for commission. So what I'm saying is your revenue or an incentive, like a trip or anything, right, should be an outcome rather than the aim when you sell a particular scheme or a mutual fund. Why do I say that? See, for example, when you start a fund which probably is giving at 15%, there are three, fund B or fund C. And if you see the commissions in each one of them, say the fund A probably gives you the least commission, the other two are giving you higher commission. But eventually, if you go in terms of accumulated over 15 years, when you see the level of the accumulated wealth, since it's trail, the value of all the three funds are more or less similar, and you actually end up making more money, similar money in fund A as compared to B and C, and also wherever you have money clients invested in fund A, the clients are more happy, right? So like Ayyappan said, the happy client is normally the guy who gets fund A, not B and C. And happy clients will definitely refer you more. So the objective of just looking at an immediate commission, which is like, in the short-term incentive for us, and recommending a non kind of fund only because of that or primarily because of that, I don't think is the right approach. So you should basically balance in that respect as well. So again, I just want to reiterate that revenues and incentives are an outcome. So let's go to the fund selection methodology. So we follow typically, I think most of people here are experienced, they've been in the business longer than we've been. So what I'm still trying to just explain what we do. So normally we have something called as a core and a tactical fund, where, you know, inaction is what Harsh just spoke about, right, while ago. So my core is my inactive part of the portfolio. I hardly touch my core. So what we do in core is, see, essentially equity, like all of us have studied, 95% of returns are explained by just being in the asset class, right? What we do is that, you know, do chop and change or trade or something is only the 5%. So let's get the 95% at least right. So like the similar goalkeeper analogy, right? You just stand there, do nothing. At least if you do this, my core portfolio, at least 60% of the time I'm not doing anything. At least not doing a lot. So that's what we do. So that is a major play on the asset class per se. So where we choose, typically we want to address the entire breadth of the market there. So we do flexi caps, multi caps, large and mid, those kind of stocks, schemes there. And where we also have a quantitative check in portfolio quality, consistency. We look at portfolio quality much more than anything else. I think I missed, and similarly, consistency of performance, which is a big thing. And the remaining part, about a 30-40, which is my tactical. So right now we have out of 400, 4,000 or 3,500 schemes in the mutual fund industry. My current active universe is only about 208. So we would definitely want to expand that coverage more. But still, out of that, I need only 8 or 9. Like somebody explained earlier, I think Ayyappan also said the same thing. So out of this universe, so we also, this is the tactical is where my alpha generation happens, the upside kick. So we go for, let's say, mid-cap schemes here, small, thematic. So, you know, those kind of schemes are typically on the 30% kind of a bracket. Here, selection is basically on our research understanding, outlook of a particular sector, what is hot, what is not. Say, for example, in COVID, we did IT and healthcare, then we switched it to something else later. So those kind of things we do here. Here, typically slightly short term, 1 or 2 year view we take. Obviously, tax and transaction costs are important. So that's why we limit this part of the portfolio to a small portion, so that we also know, because even the client feels that we're not doing anything. So here, this part we're actually doing a lot, so that they also get comfort. So typically what we do is, out of about 8 or 9 schemes in a portfolio, 5 or 6 comes from this bucket, and 2 or 3, 3 or 4 comes from the other bucket. I think I skipped a slide. Oh no, okay. So how do you pick a fund? I think most of us have our own style, but I just want to share what we do. Short-term returns are irrelevant. We definitely don't look at short-term returns at all. So that's one. Because like somebody said, right, even Harsh shared that example, the last bit is still making 12%, right? So even if you get something very wrong also, marginally half wrong also, somewhere in the middle, so you are still making 13, 14%, which is not very bad. So don't look at short term. Typically what is very hot this time, we never touch that. We don't buy very hot funds. Every fund, so the second one is, every fund goes through a bad phase. So stick with it as long as your conviction for buying that fund lasts. If you think the portfolio quality is right, or the fund manager is not chasing returns, if you think that is right, then stick with it. Because in my view, every scheme in a portfolio should not be doing well all the time. There should be 1 or 2 which also don't do well, because every scheme should have a purpose in a scheme. Just don't put a scheme just because it has to be there. Every scheme in a portfolio has to have a purpose. So that's the reason, stick with them as long as you change your mind. So obviously well diversified, the other part. So this is how we look at, we don't do very focused funds, because that again kind of skews return too much. That could be part of the tactical scheme rather than the core. Reasonable, so all this is there. Last but stickiness of the fund manager, although every AMC, right, no disrespect to Nippon, every AMC says we have a process, right? But I think that process is a tad overrated, so we should develop our own process. I would, in an ideal world, I don't want to pick schemes based on fund managers, but I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. So obviously you'll have to look at, fund manager track record and those kind of things. But in an ideal world, that should not happen. I still hope to get there someday. So this is how we construct portfolios. Basically every scheme in the portfolio. So this is one thing which we always say, that, see, one of my clients, or most of you, I'm sure you also get this feedback, that, whenever we make money, client bolta hai, paisa bana to bazar ki wajah se, the market's gone up, you make money. And if you lose money, it's because of you, right? So irrespective, either ways, as an advisor, you're not getting credit. So I said, why should I take your recommendation in that sense, right? You buy what I say, so at least I can defend, right? If I buy the client scheme, anyway I'm not getting credit, so may as well you follow my advice. So that's our philosophy. So basically every scheme of mine is decided by my research process. I will be guided by that, and if the client recommends me a particular fund, I'll give it to them, refer it to them, but I will not buy that because the client is saying. In case the client is too insistent, we decide not to work with them. So that's our style. So typically, so we have about 8 or 9 schemes in a portfolio, about 12 to 15% is the average exposure. So again, like you said, core, what we mentioned earlier, so these will have typically flexi, large, mid, and all the others come in small theme. So I also use small cap as more a tactical, more a theme, rather than a secular trend. So that's the way we kind of also limit in terms of too much excesses in particular schemes, and so that's still 30%. So if it goes beyond a particular limit, you can easily rebalance that part. So obviously, the whole idea is cores, provide stability. Like it said, tactical allocations more a medium-term outlook, and so also then reiterate this point that every fund has a bad phase, and adequate portfolio will, so if you have a diversified portfolio, even if a fund is not performing, you should be okay, because the main thing is the portfolio return. If look at it on a holistic basis, portfolio return is important. So if your portfolio return number is high, so if 1 or 2 schemes are underperforming, it's okay, because their time will anyway come.
Arun, I think we have...
You're done?
Yep.
Yeah, this is the last part, in terms of whether to time or not to time. So we basically follow dual this one. So direct allocation for this, I used to do 100% STP about 5 years ago, but now we think there is momentum in the market, so we switch. So depending on client objectives, you kind of move whether this side or that side. But typically it has to be a combination so that you don't do timing of the market too much. So I think last is just about to summarize. The objective is to beat inflation and benchmark on a long-term basis. Obviously, all of us live for that. But you should set the client expectation right. So once you set that, I think most of the work is done, and you should be patient enough with funds also.
Thank you. Thank you, Arun. Thank you so much.